Hello there. Now, the world is getting richer. In fact, in Asia, the number of ultra-high net worth individuals is expected to surge about 40% over the next 5 years. So it is getting richer. The good news is the rich are helping increasingly to solve the problems of the world. The not so good news is, they say, the newly minted are still very tight on the purse strings. So let's get some insights on those who have been giving. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Harald Ling, chairman of B.Grimm. And through his privately held conglomerate and a family foundation, he supports education, healthcare, wildlife conservation, the arts, and equestrian sports in Thailand. Lucio Tan III, and if you're wondering why he's joining us virtually, he's under the weather, so we do appreciate that Lucio is still with us today. His vice chair and chief operating officer of LT Group over the past 2 decades, his foundation has been repairing, building freshwater basins in North Luzon to improve water quality, conservation, irrigation, and is a longtime supporter of teacher training, medical missions, housing for the poor. First off, I'd like to invite Harald to give us his initial thoughts.
Thank you. Actually, I'm not a pathfinder. Actually, I just follow my predecessors. So our company was the first one to make modern medicines in Thailand. And we have seen that, so my grandfather joined the company in 1903. It was founded in 1878. And when looking at the past, they have always been trying to do something which they thought was good for society. And so some of the things made money and some of the things cost money. And we just continue like that. So, but whatever we do, we try to do something which is helpful to society, and that is in these various areas you talk about in the businesses about energy, healthcare, industry, shipping, and some other areas. And in social causes, you just mentioned a few. Maybe we should mention education as well, like Lucio is doing. Thank you.
Lucio, your initial thoughts?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much for the warm introduction, Haslinda. So I guess from my perspective, just a quick biographical data about myself. I spent the first 12 years of my life over in the Philippines, and I moved to California over in middle school. I spent 15 years of my life in the Bay Area, from middle school, high school, and college. I studied electrical engineering and computer science in college, and I worked for 2 years as a software engineer. Then I came back in late 2019, early 2020, and currently spend the significant majority of my time in Tanduay, which is a rum company under the Lucio Group of companies, LTG, Philippine Airlines, as well as the holding company itself, LTG. And so LTG is deeply embedded in the fabric of Philippine society. Our airline links a lot of communities all over the Philippines, providing business lifelines and connecting various families. Our real estate ventures are at the front line of economic progress, and our consumer products, from banking services to beverages and bottled water, provide household staples and basic services that Filipinos use every day. And so this gives us an enormous reach into the day-to-day reality of Filipino families everywhere, both around the country and throughout the world. And there are more than 12 million Filipinos overseas living and working in dozens of countries, and their utilization of our banking, airline, and consumer products cut across borders and geographic barriers. So that enormous reach and influence gives us a massive responsibility to do our part to lift the Filipino people we serve and their communities. We also recognize that these communities are scattered across more than 7,000 islands. And so unfortunately, that makes the Philippines especially vulnerable to climate change and the whims of nature. In fact, just a few days ago, a super typhoon hit the economic heartland of Luzon, devastating tons of farming communities and jeopardizing harvests. Unfortunately, over the last 10 months, we've also had 2 super typhoons and 1 major earthquake hit the north, south, and central regions of the country. And so such calamities add a whole new dimension to the economic challenges we face. So we are overall determined to protect, preserve, and sustain even as we produce and grow. We have set up philanthropic foundations such as the Tanyanki Foundation and the Philippine Airlines Foundation to focus on the welfare of the communities we serve. and disaster relief is a huge part of this. Our companies and their personnel mobilize to bring relief goods and other support services to calamity-stricken areas. Beyond this, we are also undertaking on projects to build socialized housing, protect food security, develop livelihood and financial literacy at a community level, and protecting fragile habitats and endangered species. So I'm very much looking forward to our discussion today, and also take this as an opportunity to discuss how ASEAN companies can take philanthropy to the next level. Thank you.
Thanks for that. You know, Harald, you started by saying that you're not a pathfinder, but you're a trailblazer, because even before philanthropists out there started embedding philanthropy into their investment and business decisions and their strategies, you were already doing that, because you've always taken an approach of mindfulness, compassion, love. Take us through your thinking on how that is the base of the philanthropy that you do.
Well, our purpose is to do business with compassion, and we want to develop the country further, the countries we are in, and we like to do that in harmony with nature. So as I said before, there are a number of things we do which are businesses, and they provide benefit to the communities and also financial benefits to the shareholders. But then there are a number of initiatives we do from the very beginning, so since the company was founded in 1878, that are just purely for the benefit of other people and for the society as such. So we try not to separate what we do into business and CSR, whatever it's called. But we think we are human beings, we're just one. And I think this is something especially when we look at all the religions, actually the religions, they have it all already. So we use a lot the Thai words of compassion, loving kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So to make people aware that this is a normal life. Actually, businesses are there to do something good for society, and so we like people to be together with loving care in the company. So when they go home, they can be good parents, good children, and they can have a fulfilled life in the company and outside the company. So that is actually all what we try to achieve in B.Grimm. And then, personally, when I go abroad, now we always had the hope that we can become a really, truly international company, which now we are kind of well on the way to be active in different continents with bigger investments. And so I recently was asked to join the Thailand Foundation. And then whatever we do when we go abroad, we try to bring across the values of the Thai society and the things that maybe people don't connect with Thailand, like high professional ways of working. And so we now, maybe it's a personal thing, I love to play polo. And so now Thai polo, we choose the name as Thai polo for our, and is now recognized as a representative of really high professionalism, and we conduct tournaments and for other people, not for ourselves, and do that. And the same, we try to do that in education. So one thing I can highly recommend is a harbor-based university that we brought to Thailand that educates internet entrepreneurs through professionals of the best companies in the world, teaching the students on how to become an internet entrepreneur, learning all the technologies you need for that. And I think this is something that brings also the Thai name into a better context abroad.
Lucio, you mentioned all the philanthropic endeavors at your company. Give us a sense of how you're measuring impact. They say if you can't measure it, you can't fix it. I mean, what kind of metrics are you using? How do you measure effectiveness?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess from my standpoint, I'll answer this question from both a strategic and process-oriented standpoint. So one of the key factors, or one of the key methods that we use to try to maximize our impact is first identifying which communities and areas currently experience, the greatest need. So for example, in the case of healthcare, we try to target communities in very impoverished regions, as well as areas that recently suffered from natural calamities that afflicted healthcare capabilities, and other provinces as well by, recent devastating typhoons. We believe that, through deploying our resources to areas that would benefit the most from them is how we truly maximize the value of our resources. So that was kind of an example from a more optimization standpoint, from strategic, but from a process-oriented standpoint, a new process we introduced in the Lucio group of companies streamlines the various corporate initiatives from different companies under a shared council to help improve teamwork and knowledge sharing amongst these organizations. So in fact, this year, our conglomerate set up a CSR council to better coordinate the activities of different organizations and CSR units in our various companies. And so through doing this, we hope to more easily identify and leverage, the synergies among these corporations to significantly increase the effectiveness. And of course, as an added benefit, this approach would also enable each organization to learn from one another, to discover new opportunities and unlock new ideas and approaches. So essentially, it's a matter of, first identifying the communities of greatest need, and optimization from a strategic standpoint to basically have this unified council to best identify synergies. So that's in terms of efficiency. In terms of measuring impact itself, that's extremely tricky, and that's it's very, very difficult in general to have to measure impact in general. So this is actually one of the aspects that we see the most opportunity for and potential for growth in the context of our own processes.
And Harald,
so right now, what we currently do. Go ahead. I guess what we currently do is we read over reports from various company foundations that essentially tell us what communities have been served, what goods or services were received, how many people use their air transport services, etc. So essentially, we have all of these quantitative reports for tracking purposes, and we regularly compare a lot of this data to report in these reports to our outreach targets that we strive to reach on a monthly and yearly basis. So right now, it's a lot of comparing numbers to targets. And so, as you know, this is still pretty surface level. And one of the areas that we discussed potentially to dive deeper beyond this is, the concept of measuring how our philanthropic works make an impact over time. And this is something that it's still a work in progress, but it's very key that we really get a hold on this, because a strong time indicator would show us whether we're truly able to make these sustainable, long-lasting impact.
We talk about impact, we talk about scale. You look at it quite differently, Harald. You say it's not about ROI.
Yes, actually, I think the world has maybe become too scientific. And when I try to explain, let's say, to veterinarian students, I ask them, what is science? So science is actually looking at nature and seeing whether an experiment, if you do it 1,000 times, always comes the same. But there's something that goes beyond that, and I think all the emotional values, all the values of loving kindness, that is something we can try to measure, but that's not the main point. Or being able to meditate properly, or to have in times of crisis, to be able to cope with it well. So we introduce mindfulness in organization or meditation practices in all our companies. So make us more resilient, but make us also maybe better citizens, so that we can use this loving kindness when during all phases of our life. And so, measurement, I think, is great if you can, but sometimes maybe that's not the main point. Sometimes you just want to be a nicer society.
What are your views on partnerships for scale, for greater impact? Because just today we had Gates, Dalio, Temasek joining hands to do philanthropy, to do good work. Lucio, your thoughts on what partnerships can bring, and are you looking at them?
Yeah, absolutely. So overall, as we mentioned, I think partnerships can bring about plenty of synergies across these various different foundations, So like, as I mentioned, from the perspective of, the Lucio Group's CSR Council, what we were able to see is that we were able to leverage a lot of the synergies from the separate foundations that we have underneath this council, the various organizations and companies underneath this council. So that enables us to not only share our combined resources, but also be able to, combine outreach and allocate resources specifically to these various different companies' target groups. So I think overall, it's kind of an exponential solution where you're essentially joining together a lot of different companies in addition to their target groups to essentially give relief to, et cetera, and be able to not only combine resources, but be able to more efficiently distribute them across the various different groups. So I think it's great, yeah.
How about in terms of intergenerational philanthropy, Lucio? I mean, how are you doing it differently from the others before you?
Yeah, I guess, I've been here for about 2 years or so. And, it's definitely something where I'm trying my best to learn as much as possible in terms of the various processes that we have. But one thing that I do think I can make an immediate impact in is technology. And I think that that's something that, I got my undergraduate and master's degrees in computer science and electrical engineering. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. For example, in the space of healthcare, there is essentially e-radiology, like a matter of, I guess, keeping track of electronic records such that if, let's say, radiology scans were to be done on a remote provincial area, you could essentially send those electronically to like a more well-established institution with radiologists there to be able to analyze and interpret these results. So that's just one of the examples in which, I think technology will be a key driver for us moving forward for philanthropy.
Will your kids be doing philanthropy differently, Harald? Would you consider the Giving Pledge? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my family is very lucky. Our children are maybe even more giving-oriented than ourselves. And so, actually, I'd rather give it to our children and let them look after it. And I've also noticed that in Europe, actually, the older families, they are much more willing to share than the younger ones. And so we will entrust it to our children. One of them is a very spiritual-oriented person, and the other is in business. So rather than give it to people I don't know, or we don't know, I think I'd entrust it to our children. And they have already proven that they are very generous in their behavior. And they're also very down-to-earth in the way they live their lives. So they don't try to ask for things that are ostentatious at all.
I have a couple of questions here to both of you. What would be your call to action to fellow philanthropists? Lucio, would like to start with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that overall, a change in mindset is definitely first and foremost definitely needed. Building awareness at this time is a pretty good start, but I believe that if we don't take ownership and stewardship towards trying to fix these actual various issues, progress and improvements will still be very difficult to achieve. So part of the challenge really is trying to persuade ourselves that such efforts work to support and sustain our traditional business ventures rather than against them. Supporting communities, promoting education and health, fighting climate change, all these different issues, we can't just see them as things that we passively contribute towards so we can continue with our normal day business. But in fact, they have to be part of how we define success in our businesses.
Harold?
Well, I think the worst thing that ever has been told in business school is that businesses are for profit and for shareholder wealth. I think businesses are there to do something good for society. So I think if you do that in your heart and then try to extend that to all the causes that you think that are really valuable and that you can be part of, I think that's already good enough. And I think it's really wonderful. I really would like to thank Temasek and Singapore for organizing this stewardship and these philanthropic seminars, because that maybe awakens more the spirit and people see that maybe we can do more things together. Today, all the presentations, there are many things that we are doing that were presented here today, and that gives the opportunity for us to reach out to all these organizations and whether we can do something together or whether they can help us in Thailand or whether we can help them in other places, like, for instance, in Vietnam, where we're very active. So I think these getting together are very, very valuable. And I think the most important is that people have a heart for helping others.
Linked to that, Harald, there's a question. How can we scale, radiate loving kindness such that it become the company's ethos or societal norms? I know that it is within your company.
Well, it's not that easy because our lives are so busy. There are only so many other things, and now you have in the companies, you have KPIs, and you have this and that, and you're pressured and so on. I think I think if we as a society become more religious again, not in the sense of forcing others to believe what we believe, but seeing that actually 2,500 years ago, there were always all these thoughts that comprise everything we have been talking about today. And if we just look at that and try to make it more as part of our lives, not as being, because it's being a religion, but because it is very good for society, then I think we can have a more loving society. It is, of course, call for action for everybody. It's not that one or the other person can do that or inspired. Maybe I'm not a very inspirational person, so I don't think I would be a good example for that.
Oh, Harald. Lucio, this one's for you. How have the priorities in environmental philanthropic efforts changed before and after COVID? Which areas are currently of most significant concern for you?
So I guess with regards to how COVID has changed the overall philanthropic landscape here in the Philippines, I guess COVID has essentially exacerbated a lot of the various different types of issues that, currently exist. For example, just as a quick example here, talking about education, there is currently, due to there's essentially this like lost, quote unquote, lost generation, a group of individuals. These are these students who are essentially attending school from 2020 to 2022. A lot of these students were not, due to lack of connectivity and IT access. A lot of these people were unable to essentially learn much. Like they weren't able to participate much in school, weren't able to really get this form of education that's really needed. And so that has essentially deteriorated a lot of the academic scores that a lot of these students have had. So like, that's just one example over here. I can go into a lot of other examples, but from the perspective of just education itself, we can already see that COVID has really driven up the necessity to address a lot of these philanthropic concerns.
Lucio, I started the conversation by implying that the newly rich are tighter on the purse strings. Do you see that?
Tighter on the purse strings?
They're not doing philanthropy in a huge way, as big as they can have. I mean, as you mill around, meet the newly rich, is that a sense you're getting, or is that an unfair observation?
I think it's kind of hard to generalize that. It really boils down to the individual and their core values. I know I know of some friends who are in that category, but are extremely philanthropic as well. So it really depends.
Final question for you, Harald. We're running out of time.
Yeah.
People talk about.
May I make a comment to that? Mm-hmm. I think the youngest generation, they are very society-minded, and so I find in the company they really want to have a purpose. They really want to have a purpose in life, and many come because they think they like the idea of compassion, for instance. I think the younger generation, they are great hope.
We talk about legacy all the time.
Yeah.
What is the legacy you'd like to leave behind?
Well, that doing business with compassion can lead you to great success. So being compassionate and being successful goes probably hand in hand much better than being not compassionate and successful. Yeah.
Lucio, too early to be talking about legacy, but your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's definitely important, begin with the end in mind. So I guess my thoughts are that at the end of the day, we can try to maximize value for our various different organizations and companies. But at the end of the day, in addition to, that's all well and good, but it's always also about trying to maximize the value that we can bring over to society as a whole. And, just being able to go and maximize the value of your own businesses and organizations, in my opinion, is just insufficient. There should be this level of long-lasting impact on society as a whole. We're in a position to really make these types of changes. We're very fortunate to be in this position, and giving back and really making a long-lasting impact to society is a huge part of our legacy. Thank you.
On that note, Lucio, Harald, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.